Thank you. Again, my name is Nelson Valena. To be honest, this has been a very trying week for me. I'm not used to being up in stage, and when I share my story, you'll understand why. The last couple of days has been, I would say, very interesting in the sense that a lot of things have come into fruition. Uh, there's always a balance, and the anxiety that I feel in regards to being here and being vulnerable is also counterbalanced by the excitement that I feel, because I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And with my story, you'll understand why. So today, I will present to you how integration of spirituality and science can lead you to wellness. And I'm actually coming out again in a very big way. I'm coming out as first time as a woo-woo doctor. So, so who here in the crowd is woo? And I'm proud to be a woo doctor. So what does woo mean? Maybe it's something that's not proven or unseen. Maybe it's something that has no evidence base. But I can tell you that in my 10, 12 years that I've experienced a lot of things, those things are real to people that have actually benefited from it. So I'm telling you that woo isn't always something that should be dismissed. So today, I will hope to give you some information, but also share my story. And it's about really simple thing. And this is something that I share with my partner, Jason. Every time we have challenges, he always says, what do you always say, Nelson? And I say, what the answer is unconditional love. So to me, I'm not giving you a science or any type of studies, research. I was toying between, I was talking to Chang this week, and I was very anxious because I went to my regular old self when I went into fear, and I started doing a lecture. So I told him, I have like 50 slides now, and it's all about, the science of, the neuroanatomy and so on. He's like, you're not supposed to do a lecture. And I said, oh yeah, I forgot. So I hope to tell you that sometimes when we get in fear, we revert back to those coping strategies. And mine was rationalization and trying to make sense of it from my brain. But what Spirit told me is I need to do it from my heart. So today I will give you that. And I hope that you will understand and get something out of it. So to start, I'm going to go from the end. So this is Golden Hill Center. And this is the center that my partner Jason and I created. And we created it since November 2020. And it actually happened because of a plant medicine ceremony. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. And I wanted to show you what each of the symbols mean. Of course, the cross is about balance. Okay. The horizontal line is about balance. The vertical line is about alignments. And the heart, I will tell you, is the base of all things. It is the integration between science and spirituality, and the physical world and the non-physical world. And it's true what they say in a lot of the old traditions is that truly the message is that we have to activate our hearts. For that is truly our inner healer. So I will show you my story of how I came about to that. This is me with my dad. I was born on March 16th, 1965. So I'm almost 60 years old. So my parents were physicians, and my mom and dad had a practice in the Philippines. They actually started a hospital there. And my mother told me that when I was born, she didn't know what to name me. So she looked around and she saw the pediatrics textbook, Nelson's Pediatrics. So she said, Nelson, that sounds like a great name. So all of a sudden, you know what that means, is especially Filipino and the oldest son, that expectations is I'm supposed to be a doctor. Well, guess what? When I was in kindergarten, I was 5.5 years old. I went to the town Kalawag and I pronounced to the whole village that I'm going to be a doctor when I grew up. So I grew up in medicine pretty right away. I was pretty much enculturated in the medical system, or at least my parents' system, pretty early on. I remember going to my dad's clinic and there were jars of breast tissue, like lumpectomies. And, so I would be in there looking at it. And I remember the first time I saw uh, an extremity was in a bathtub. There was a farmer or somebody that had an injury and they had to, amputate the arm, and I saw it. So it was pretty much, comfortable for me. So I pretty much knew that's probably I'm going to be a doctor. So all these years, it was pretty much expected. So my parents went to New York in 1971. We immigrated here because they wanted to escape martial law, because the guerrillas were trying to have them take care of them. And my parents said, I want our children to live in a safe place. And so they took us to outside New York City in 1971. They actually did their residencies and they started a practice in Greenville, Pennsylvania, which is a small town of about 7,000 people. This town was pretty much not too much diversity. We were pretty much the one or two or a couple of Asian families. So I started to understand what it's like to be a little different and to be a minority. But it was sort of nice because my parents, because they were physicians, everyone knew who they were. So it was nice for me. I get some benefits. For example, I was working at a restaurant and I was a busboy and then later on a waiter. And when my parents' uh, patients would come, they knew who I was. So they would give me big tips. So I said, oh, great. Remember, I'm Dr. Valena's son. So it was sort of this, interesting thing about, oh, I like to be in a medical family and, I'm supposed to be doing this. So I pretty much took it on for myself. But when I went to college, I went to University of Michigan. I started questioning if that's really what I wanted or if it's something that I was doing for my parents, because I was always like a good boy trying to do the right things and so on and so on. And I realized after working like 6 months at JCPenney's, I was relieving uh, workers. And one time I was actually in the women's department and some women were trying to do, ask me about, brassieres and all this stuff. And I didn't even know how to unhook it. And so it was pretty much like, I'm not sure if this is something I want to do. So I said, maybe I should go back into school, because I took 6 months off actually, because I was burnt out then. And I said, I think I want to go back into medicine. So I went back into school and I actually went to University of Pittsburgh for medical school. And there I learned a lot of things, but, I was pretty much going in the regular track. And then all of a sudden I went to here because it's a rehab program. So I did the whole thing and developed, I graduated and taught at Baylor College of Medicine for several years and had a private practice. And I developed it all the way up to, I had 4 physicians under me. I had clinics. I went to 4 different hospitals and I thought I was living the life. As physicians, yes, we sort of go to school, then we do residency, then we do fellowship. And I did from residency, I did physical medicine rehabilitation, brain injury medicine, and then I went ahead and became an attending at Baylor. So I built up a private practice and had the life because I had this beautiful home in the Heights. I finally made it. You know how it is. You're mid 40s and you're like, wow, I paid off all my loans and I'm really, doing it right because I get to travel, I get to have, but you know how it's 60 hours of work, and you get home and really, are you enjoying this home? And what happened was I built this house in the Heights. It was my dream home. It was on a street called Ridge and it had this beautiful view of the city. And it took 2 years to build. And I was living there. And I remember one time I was up on the fourth floor and there was a big jacuzzi. And I came home at 11 o'clock at night and I was up in the jacuzzi and I said, is this it? Is this all I wasn't, feeling very satisfied about that because I was working hard. I had to pay off that house. And if you know me, I like to throw parties. I have tons of people over, and then I would burn the candles in both ends. I would work out. I used to work out and go to Memorial Park 6 miles a day, go out, work. And I worked at, 4 different hospitals. Then I was also teaching residents. Then all of a sudden, back in 2011, on October, I was working at St. Luke's Hospital doing consults. Then all of a sudden, I started having some problems with my balance. And then I noticed that when I was talking to the patients, I had trouble getting my words out. And then I said, oh, this must be the trazodone that I'm taking because I can't sleep. I've always had problems with sleep. So, once in a while it gets groggy. And so I took it that. But it didn't go away. For 3 days, I had left facial weakness, dysarthria, and problems with my balance. And I'm a brain injury rehab doc. I totally ignored it. In my mind, there's no way I could be having a stroke. There's no way. So I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Finally, on that Monday, the nurses called me and I couldn't remember what they said. And that really honed in that there's something wrong. And I went to St. Luke's Hospital and surely enough, I had an infarct. That moment changed my life because it made me realize something is going wrong here. And what is it? And I wasn't sure what I was going to do because they did the workup and there was nothing. They called it cryptogenic stroke, meaning that all the tests were negative and basically they couldn't do anything. So I was in a panic thinking, what am I going to do? Is it going to happen again? And I'm a hard worker. If you know me, I was perseverance. My basketball coach in ninth grade said, look at Nelson. He tries so hard. He sucks, but he tries so hard. One time I did the basketball in ninth grade and I went the wrong way and scored for the other team. So I was like, I try really hard though. So that was my motto. Try, try, try. I could will it. My dad taught me that. Is all I can do is put my mind to it and I can get it done. So all through training, that's what I do. We don't get sleep. Fine. I can do it. I push ahead. What did that teach me? It taught me not to pay attention to my body or my emotions. And I think as physicians and healthcare professionals, we have to do that. We have to do that to do our work for us to survive, for us not to be able to cave under pressure. So it's always push, 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 push. And so that was my life. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I went back to work 7 days after my stroke because I felt guilty that I would have to have somebody else take over my patients. And I pushed and pushed and pushed. But yet, I said, looking back now, that was the worst thing I ever done because I was trying to teach residents while I was in that state. It spiraled down, spiraled down, spiraled down until I got very depressed. I was on benzodiazepines, I was on Ativan, I was on Seroquel, I was on Wellbutrin. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm living like this. I was walking out of St. Luke's Hospital and the metro that's right there. And I just wanted to step in front of it. I said, this is not what I want to be. I have to do something. And that's when it kicked in, is I really have to do something drastic. And so I sold that house. One of the things that I realized was I needed to decrease my stress, my financial stress. I was overstressed because I had this big fancy house that I thought was the thing I wanted. But I couldn't do anything in terms of doing working somewhere else or whatnot until I had that financial burden. I also had to get a work-life balance. Had to stop doing all these activities and trying to give myself some time to relax and be comfortable. The other thing is I had to find out what's going on in terms of what's out of alignment in terms of my mind, body, spirit. Of course, I've always tended to eat healthy, but I decreased the alcohol and started eating better and also balanced the exercise and movement. Here's the deal. Most of us who are doctors are type A, that we push and push and push. And like I said, I was working out at 5 o'clock in the morning, going to 6 miles in Memorial Park, then doing all my rounds. And it was way too much that my body basically said, enough is enough. I'm going to give you something to tell you that it's time to quit that. So it's that mentality of always doing, 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 doing. And now I realize that's what they call the masculine energy. That's that's what they call the yang. And you get to realize that there's always needs to be a balance. There always needs to be the yin or the feminine energy. So I had to learn how to be. I had to learn to stop. And that was hard for me. I mean, I can't sit still. I remember my dad, when he walks in, I knew that I had to get up because he would tell me to do this, this, and this. And I did the same thing with Jason. When I would be in the kitchen and he comes in and he's working, I couldn't sit still. I had to get up. And it's still a habit for me today because it's ingrained in me that that's what I'm supposed to do. So it began to become a real challenge for me in terms of changing my whole life and the way I am. The other thing that happened is this thing called spirituality and really finding out what it is that's valuable to me and who I am. I began to see that, all these things that make me depressed or anxious is really telling me something. It's not that I'm going to need to take these medications, but it needs to be me looking at my life and seeing what's out of alignment. So I started going into these different experiences and I started doing breath work. I started doing yoga. I started to calm down my nervous system because I was so amped up. And I'm sure you physicians know that our baseline is, constantly going, going, going. And it takes you days to try to even just slow down. So I had to be a beer instead of a doer. And like I said, it takes a long time to do that. The other thing is I started to do my spiritual work, meaning that how you can find out what your spiritual work is really where you get triggered. What is that makes you really pissed off? And I started to look at all the things in my life that has become a challenge for me. And how I describe it is really walking the line in terms of the contrast. Because all of the spiritual traditions I see it's all about trying to get balance and harmony. And also the dark and the light. One of the things I love about this diagram, it's just the yin and the yang, the male and the female energies. And within it, you can see there's also two balls that has a connection. An important part of spirituality is understanding a term called entanglement. Entanglement, when two particles are entangled, they're connected. And what happens to one will happen to the other, even if they're far away in distance. And when I realized that that's a core foundation of many of the spiritual traditions, and really that's how we should think about ourselves. What I realized is that many of the traditions and all of the prophecies and all of that say that as humans, or they're started from a one source. It's like a big dot like the Big Bang. And as it's exploded and fragmented, we are the fragments, that we are each part of that big source, and we are now each our individual persons or plants or animals. How I picture it too is a disco ball, like Studio 54. And there's each of those mirrors are angled a different way. And when it breaks, it's in pieces. And in those pieces is going to be a different reflection depending on the angle. And that's who we are. We're from one. However, we are reflecting a different part of reality. But we all have to come together as a whole in order to truly heal. And I think that that's what we have to do now, is really come back as a whole in order for us to live a happy life. This is another thing that I learned. Sometimes you have to face your fear, where it holds the treasures that you seek. Meaning that these things that are challenges for you are really opportunities for growth. So now I consider the stroke as the best thing that's ever happened in my life, because it led me to being here at this moment. If I didn't change, I would have probably had another stroke, probably had maybe cancer or other things. Currently, I'm actually studying with Dr. Nader Bhutto, who is a cardiologist from Israel. And he has a program called Unified Integrative Medicine. And what I love about him, I was drawn to him, is that he is one of the few physicians that I know that starts from the psycho-spiritual realms and traces it back down to the physical realm. Your interests and passions are not random, they're connected to your purpose. What does that mean? It means that everything that you feel like doing and giving you joy and getting flow is what will help you heal and connect to the spiritual world, because that is what you're meant to do. Jason would tell me, why are you always looking at the spiritual works and all of that? We're looking at reading books and whatnot. But I could do that for hours and hours and hours. And truthfully, when I was studying in medical school, I hated studying biochemistry and all of that. For some reason, I thought, why do we have to study this? I was sort of a big picture kind of guy. I remember in medical school that I would look at questions, and if I didn't know something, I would just hover over the questions, and I could sort of sense which one was the right answer. I didn't really understand what that was, but now I understand it's my intuition. And so I am now cultivating my intuition by beginning to understand what's my body's telling me. I'm trying to unlearn all the things that I had conditioning with in medical school. Is that I had to learn what this little feeling is in my body and what is that really telling me? Or is this telling me that I need to change something and I'm not sure where it is, but I have to take an inventory of it. So it's a big, big learning lesson for me. The other thing is this power of the heart. The greater energy you can create through the elevated emotions of the heart, the more you are going to connect with the unified field, which means you're going to experience more wholeness, connection, and oneness. Meaning that the heart is the key to balance. And you can understand that by the concepts of what? Parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So we'll go back to a little bit of science. All right. So that's called the autonomic nervous system. You have the sympathetic system, which is your fight flight, and then the parasympathetic, which is repair and regenerate. And how do you know which one's going to be activated? It's by your sense of if something is putting you in danger or is it safe. So when there's something in danger that you have to get rid of, the sympathetic system gets activated. And then the parasympathetic system pretty much gets taken over. So it's a biology that is pretty much a protection for all of us. So another piece of anatomy that I want to tell you about, it's called the triune brain. The most primitive part of the brain is the basal ganglia. It's a reptilian brain. It has to do with our instinctive responses. It's a protection response. The next level is the limbic system, our emotional system. And it has to do with socialization and emotions. And it is linked with the amygdala and hippocampus. Now, when you're looking at the reptilian system, it looks at present moment. But limbic system, it looks at past. When you go to the next level, which is the neocortex, it is the language, thought, and verbal expression. It's a higher level thinking. That area, you look at past and future. This will be important when I tell you about something that I discovered. One of the other things that brought light is this thing called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that's the longest nerve, and it's like a serpent. So who has ever heard of a term called kundalini? So you imagine that this nerve connects all of these up your spine, and it's all connected to what? The endocrine system. When I saw that, I was like, that's how it works. It works through connection from the physical to the energetic. And they're all connected, the brain, the heart, and the gut. In 1991, there's a paper that discovered there's actually 40,000 sensory neurites within your heart. And so it's its own heart, and it gets messages, and it's actually more sensitive than the brain. So did you know that the heart actually sends more messages to the brain than vice versa? So who knows about this, gut intuition as well? The gut has a lot of nerves. And when you feel something there, again, it sends signals to the brain and tells you whether to go towards it or go away from it. And then it activates the part of the brain, the limbic system, that tells you, should you react to it or what type of feeling you're going to have. I don't know if you've heard of somebody called Candace Pert. She is the author of Molecules of Emotion. And what she says is that when you have an emotion, you release neuropeptides, and those neuropeptides stay in your system for about 6 seconds. However, if you don't feel it, if you don't lean into it, that neuropeptide, those chemicals are going to be lodged into your tissues. And in the energetic world, it can be stuck in your energetic levels. So a lot of the work in the spiritual world is to find out where they're stuck and to release them. And there's various ways to release them. I'm going to skip this. This is, to me, the most important understanding of how spirituality and science works. You have to look at it through the energetic system. There's the dense energy, and then there's 0-point energy. And in between is that subtle energy, where a lot of the holistic modalities play into. And if you go from the bottom, it's the physical world, it's a science evidence base. And then as you go up, it goes into the subtle energy and the quantum physics, the things that you can't measure. And how do they all relate? Well, it relates to the things that you see on the third column. You have the purpose and meaning with the spirit. Your thoughts and beliefs is the language between the spirit and your mind. And then the feelings are the connection between the emotional and the physical world. So depending on what your feeling is, will determine what is released, and that will determine what your response will be. It's important to understand that your thoughts and beliefs are also very important in terms of determining whether you are going towards it or away from it. Our beliefs are very important in regards to creating our own reality in our world. So for example, if you're somebody who has a lot of trauma as a child, then you would have a filter, but pretty much protection. And you see the world and you look for things that's going to get you. And so that's ingrained in your system. So if you're looking for things that's going to get you, what are you going to see? You're going to see all those things that are going to get you. So your reality would be just that. And then if you are not in that mentality and you're open and you feel safe, then your whole reality is much different. So it's important for you to understand what your filter is. And that is, there's so many things that form your beliefs. Spirituality, religion. So what's the difference between spirituality and religion? Spirituality is more of a connection, your individual connection to the higher power or the unseen. Whereas religion is basically a set of dogma and things that are a lot more external that you do as a congregation or a group. So those two things are not really the same. So some people are considered religious, but maybe not spiritual, or some are only spiritual. How many of you consider yourself spiritual? How many of you consider yourself religious? Okay. So I see here that a lot more are spiritual than, say, religious. And it's interesting because spirituality is so important in terms of our health and well being that I am so, when people don't understand that, I am so saddened by that because I feel like it's something that everyone should do. For example, I feel like in the LGBT community that many of us have been uh, dismissed because we're different. And then a lot of churches don't allow it. For example, I actually volunteered at a church and I overheard that gay people are not God's best. And I was pretty much shamed by that. And I felt like I couldn't really continue in that church and I actually left that church. So I'm saddened for my LGBT brothers and sisters that they're not able to benefit from the healing power of spirituality. We've been trying to get people, LGBT people, to come to our retreat center, and it's very difficult to do that. And I understand why. Now, what is this about energetics? This is the whole new world, the quantum world. And it has to do with the unseen. But you have the chakra system, then you also have the meridians in Chinese medicine, and then you have the auras. And who knows about the auras? Yes. So the auras in the soul is very interesting to me. That's one of the things that I thought, oh, I've never really understood how all of that works. But to me, how Dr. Bhutto has it is very simple and easy to understand. But let me tell you a little bit about the chakra system. So the chakra system has to do with the emotions. And there's actually, you have to look at the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And when the chakra systems are not in alignment, you will get different types of, you could have physical symptoms, you could have also emotional, mental, and spiritual. And the key point is about balance. It can't be too much or too little of any of them. This is how I sort of visualize it. So if you have imbalances in any of them, you're not going to have full flow. That's a concept of a lot of this, the spiritual traditions in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and in the Peruvian shamanism is that you have to optimize that life force. You have to increase the flow to all of your system in order to be healthy. And when there's blocks, you have to remove it. This is how I see the soul and the biofield. They call it the biofield is another name for the energetic system. And in Dr. Bhutto's course, he has it sort of categorized into the mental and emotional is going to be the human soul. The animal soul is the etheric body, and the guiding spirit is sort of your committee. It's the thing that gives you information and guides you. It gives you morality and your intuition. So the animal soul is what tells your cells what to do. Your zygote and your embryo come together and then they divide. They divide from being one to what, 100 trillion cells. So when you have that, who gives you the messages? Who is that? What's the information? It's All that information is in the biofield. So that is uh, a different way of thinking about, where are you going to interact? Are you going to interact only in the physical level, or are you going to also look at the emotional, mental, and spiritual? So I say in our medical system, most of the emphasis is in the physical, looking at what is out of balance. What can we do in terms of adding or taking away or doing a procedure, but not really looking at the emotional, mental, and spiritual. And so I would describe it as you have this big, wide mouth of a river, and it's the energy and it's the vital flow. And as you go down, it has these little tributaries. And these tributaries are basically that physical level. So when there's blocks, the energy to that physical level gets affected, and eventually you get disease and symptoms. So if we only look at the downstream effect of the disease and symptoms, then we're eventually will have those symptoms and disease again if there's nothing done in terms of the proximal root cause. So that's why it's important to treat the psychospiritual in order to heal the physical. What about consciousness? This is something that's very hard. I mean, for me, it was very sort of nebulous. But if you want to think about consciousness, it is really the interaction of the biofield with your brain. It's getting that information to tell you how to think and really how to behave or what your reality is going to be like. And when you have the interaction with the different parts, it basically gives you the different parts of your superego is the interaction with the guiding spirit. Your ego is the interaction with your soul, and the animal soul interacts and becomes your id. So, what does that mean? Is that each of those have a specific function, and depending on where the distortion is, you would go ahead and treat that specific area. For example, if you are having a problem with your animal soul, you would have some symptoms in the physical world. However, for example, if you are sort of lost in terms of being able to express yourself and who you are, the human soul is what your meaning and purpose is. It's your individuality. So if you are not following that, you could also have difficulty and have problems with depression and anxiety. For me, that was true because that was really the case is I wasn't following the correct path. And when I changed paths, everything in terms of my anxiety, depression actually lifted. So this is just an example of the things that you see, but also the things that are there that you cannot see. So the visual field is only a small portion. Now this is really the core of what I want to tell you. It's the story of the damsel and the dragon. So the dragon is your sympathetic system. It's your protection. If anything is in danger, it's going to be alerted and it's going to tell you to go away. The damsel, how I would see it, is the feminine energy and it's the yin energy. It's the creative force. It's the non-linear. It's the nurturing. So it's totally opposite. And it's important to know that there needs to be a balance. This is the most important slide. This is a slide that I put together from different teachings and different types of, how would you say it? Well, actually books. The circle is from Jill Bolte Taylor's Whole Brain Living. Jill Bolte Taylor was a neuroscientist from Harvard, and she had intracerebral hemorrhage on the left side of her brain, which basically shut down the left brain. And what she experienced was a whole different world. And she couldn't speak, but she could feel. She could have connection with divinity. And she was able to understand things in a symbolic way. So this is an illustration of how these filters, the left and right brain, operate. That depending on what's operating will determine how you're going to interpret the data. So if you look on the left side, it is in terms of what you call the masculine energy. And on the right side is the feminine energy. So the masculine energy is more of the competition, the individuality, getting things done, the analytical. It's the linear. And on the right, on the feminine side, it's more of the nurturing. It's more of the expansiveness, the non-linear. So depending on what your nervous system is doing, it will likely go to the masculine or the feminine. So the three questions that I have that if you are trying to see where you are, one is, are you unsafe or safe? If you are unsafe or feeling unsafe, you would tend to go to the left side. So that's going to be the protective side. If if you feel safe, you're going to be able to connect with spirit, creation, that nurturing, that individuality, and be able to see things from the unified perspective. I think that's the problem with the world today, is that we're over too much on the left masculine side, that we're seeing separation. You see what's going on today is everything is separated, whether it's politics, whether it's different groups. And why is that? Because we're all in fear. When you look at what side will be activated when you're in fear, it'd be more on the left side. If you're on the left side and in fear, you're not able to access spirituality and your true divinity. So if everybody here, especially for what's going on today, you can imagine that most people have difficulty with connecting with their spirit. So I urge you that you have to take a inventory of your life and what you're doing to see where you're at and try to get to the right side. So how do you get to the right side? Well, one of the things I discovered is the teachings of Jesus Christ. It has to be whether you are actually caring and giving service to others. When you're giving service to others, you activate the right side of the brain, the more nurturing side. So they always tell you that if you're depressed and anxious, do something for somebody else. Be a giver, be a volunteer, because that's going to get you out of that system. That always works for me. I have a great set of friends, and every time I get depressed, I try to be there and see what they're doing, or take them out, and that has become my therapy. That me actually giving becomes me actually healing. The other thing that you want to look at is whether you're at present or past and future. If you're at present state, then you are able to access the right side. However, if you're ruminating in the past and future, you're going to activate the left sympathetic side. And what happens in the plant medicine world is that you actually turn off that default mode network that ruminates on the past and future. And because of that, you're able to access more of that divinity, that creative side, and you get to be able to work through some of your issues. So that has become a big part of my understanding of what we need to do in regards to heal. Now, the other thing is that you have to be able to understand, is this your ego or is this your soul? Your ego is linked to the left filter, left brain type of thinking. It's about you surviving. What do I have to do? It's about competition. It's about how do I look good in front of others? And that was a big thing that when I'm in fear, I tend to activate my ego. And so I start trying to be smart and I try to remember things and try to give you information. And it's hard to do that it's hard to get into that nurturing creative space when you're in fear. So this is one of the things that I discovered is when the plant medicine and the ceremonies are a big part of my healing. One thing I've got to tell you is during my healing, I did holotropic breath work in Esalen. And during that time, I first experienced my inner child. My inner child was basically in a corner and crying. And I said, what's going on with this? I started looking into it and I was feeling very sad and depressed. And then I started recalling that when I was a kid, I had some incident where somebody who worked in my mom and dad's office actually sexually abused me. And I was pretty much feeling lots of shame and lots of isolation. And it became apparent that this was an inner child that was trying to come out. I was trying to get healing. And I started looking at what does it take for that inner child to heal. This is me at about, I believe that happened maybe about 4.5, 5 years old. And my parents don't even know. I never told anybody. Maybe in my 30s, I told my brothers and sisters, and I can't even remember exactly what happened or who it was, but I was beginning to think I need to look at what I need to do to heal this part of me. And I did lots of different things. I worked with lots of energy workers, and I worked with shamans. And in the shamanism, what happens is you have what they call soul retrievals, meaning that different parts of you, different fragments go away when these things happen, and they sort of hide in the background. And for healing, you need to bring the soul back and make you back whole. The other thing is that plant medicine. Plant medicine helps you open up and gets those deep down seated feelings up to the surface in order for you to heal. And it's one of the most powerful tools, I think, that can help people heal is taking these psychedelics that have been used for ancient years and get them to be able to uplift and put into your awareness what it is that you've been pushing down. I'm actually doing an ayahuasca ceremony with Dr. Buto next week. I'm flying out Wednesday and I'm going to be learning. He's the only physician that I know that's actually helping doing this. And I'm going to learn how to do that so I can help others. One of the things that I also understood is that shame is a very, very, very devastating feeling to have. You all know the work of Brene Brown. Brene Brown said that the intense, painful feeling of experiencing and believing that we are flawed. I still feel that even to this day. And one of the things that has caused me to have difficulty with doing things like this is my shame, because I'm afraid that if I expose myself to everybody, that everyone would know. One of the feelings I had, remember when I was a kid, was I felt dirty, and that if everybody knew who I was, that they wouldn't love me. So there's still a remnant of that today. And actually, what happened this past week cleared it up. I kept releasing and releasing and releasing. And this week, I I woke up one day and Jason saw me in bed, and I was crying because I felt this very, very deep pain that actually started coming out. And I knew from working with others that I had to actually feel that pain. So I leaned into it and I said, just release it. Just go ahead and feel it. And I was able to, after a few, maybe it's 6, 8 seconds, I was able to get it out. Interestingly enough, another pain happened 2 days ago. And I was telling Jen about this, is that interesting how the universe puts these things in your life. And it was a upheaval, a very significant nausea and vomiting that was right here in the middle of my chest. And this is something that I always experience when Jason and I have some challenges, because I feel this pain when I'm criticized. And it was a very deep pain, as if somebody was stabbing me. And I realized when it was coming up that it was ready to be released. So again, during that period of time, I leaned into it and I just said, okay, I'm going to feel it. And it came out, and it took about 6 seconds for me to actually release it. And from the shamanic work, I took my hands and I made a ball out of it because it was right here. And I put it through the light. And once I did that, that pain went away. And I was thinking, as a physician, perhaps that would have been something like, acute abdominal pain or gastritis or whatnot. And I probably, if I didn't know, I probably would have started taking something. And I realized, my gosh, all these people that could have had these types of modalities, how much they could have been helped instead of us giving all these pharmaceuticals that give them all these side effects. I'm not saying, just like all the other doctors here, that we need to, um, abandon what we know. Not at all. I believe in medicine, in allopathic medicine, and I believe in what we do. However, we need to integrate it with the ancient wisdom. We need to be able to look at the person as a whole and not just look at their physical realm. So, what does that mean? I'll skip this one. Is here are my 10 commandments from some of the lessons. That it's a win-win. I learned about polarity and coexistence. That if you can do a win-win, you're actually activating what? You're activating your parasympathetic system because you feel safe. Compassion to self and others. Service to self or others greater than service to self. This is one of the teachings of the law of one. If any of you have understood the law of one, it basically is channeled works from Ra. And it's the most fascinating thing I've ever heard because when I read it, there was some resonance within my body that said, this is the truth. And this is something that everyone should know. That as long as we're service to others, then we will have health and well-being. And all they say in Law of One is that you have to be greater than 51%. How hard is that? My wish, if I had a superpower, is to give everyone that feeling of what the others feel. Imagine if everybody else around you can feel what you're feeling and think what you're thinking. Who's going to hurt you? Who's going to hurt each other? That's what we need to do. And there's another thing that's called an entanglement, right? So if one happens to one part, the other part also feels it. I feel like that's the way we need to go. We need to understand that we are all connected. And for us to heal, we have to help heal each other. The other thing, thank you. The other thing that I really feel that is important is that you have to surround yourself with people that uplift you. People that gives you joy and not people that gives you angst, stress you out. You heard of energy vampires, right? And especially us woo-woo people that are very sensitive, we feel it. One of the things I realized during my first ayahuasca session was I purged and purged and purged and purged. And I said, what is this all negative energy coming from me? I'm a nice person, And at that place I went to, they had a physician, they had a psychologist, they had three shamans from the Andes and 3 from the Amazon. And we all gathered together as a group and we discussed what happened and to process it. And I realized that one of the things that healthcare professionals do is they absorb all these negative energy. I work with trauma patients all my life. I work with spinal cord patients, and I never shielded myself. So all of that had to come out. And one of the things we have to teach medical professionals is the clearing and shielding for us not to take that all in. And if we can do that, we can give more to others. The other thing is that you have to live authentically. So truly, you guys have helped me live authentically by helping me be here and be able to share my story. And I want you to be able to share your story and to be able to open your hearts. And I know I forgot lots of things. And that's one of the things I want to work on is I feel okay about that. Maybe, maybe I can make a mistake. Maybe I can look a little foolish. Maybe I can be vulnerable and get emotional. I think that's the key lesson for all of us is we do need to do that. We need to show our side that we can care, that we are sensitive, and that we have emotions, as well as the being side, the masculine side, the things that have been taught and ingrained in us. The only way we can make changes in this world is to get balance and harmony, and for us to be truly human, and for us to truly open up our hearts. So I'm hoping that sharing my story will open up your hearts, and I'm hoping that you can spread that to others. Thank you.